There it is, man. Good morning. Straight like that. Y'all know the vibes. You woke up this morning, you already won. I hope you are doing something right now that your future self will thank you for. It's your boy, Earl of Pearl. And today, I am joined by my homeboy, Ethan Sands of Cleveland.com, who covers the Cleveland Cavaliers. Ethan, good morning. I feel like,
Good.
bro, I ain't seen you in person in probably like 3 weeks. Is that
Well,
about accurate?
yeah, that's not our fault. That's the Cleveland Cavaliers and All-Star break fault. That
Listen.
definitely feels right.
Yeah, man. I think the last game I worked was the Laker game, the LeBron game, and then of course All-Star break. The Cavs was on the West Coast. I think when we played the first home game back, my daughter had senior night, so you gotta weigh it. Being a father come first and had to do my 1-2. So it's nice to see you, bro. I can't wait to see you in person later on today as NBA play finally resumes. I know it has been crazy without NBA basketball since Sunday, but the college basketball landscape has been fun. So I've been kind of catching up on a lot of those games, man. But today we are going to talk to the audience about second half expectations, some of the challenges that the Cleveland Cavaliers might face, and I'll let you explain to the audience of what you meant when you said the timeline has been amplified. But first, it is a good time to let people know to like, subscribe to the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show YouTube page. You can use that QR code right there in the corner. We're trying to get to 100,000 subscriptions, but make sure you ring the bell so that you can stay in the know of this spinoff show and the rest of the spinoff shows on the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show YouTube channel. So before we get into anything as far as, second half expectations and things like that, later on tonight, the Cleveland Cavaliers tip off the second part of their season against the Brooklyn Nets. Ethan, can you give us any injury updates on Evan Mobley, Dean Wade, and one Max Strus?
Yeah, I definitely can. So let's start here, right? The injury report for tonight's game already lists that Evan Mobley and Dean Wade are not on it. So that means that they will be making their return on Thursday night against the Brooklyn Nets. But it also means that Max Strus is still on it. And we talked with Kenny Atkinson after practice on Wednesday about this. I asked him specifically if there was any updates. He said that Max Strus is progressing. Don't get too excited, but he is progressing. He still is going through individual workouts. He has yet to take contact. Obviously, we know there's 27 games left. There's a little runway left for Max Strus to potentially make his season debut. And Earl, I think it's interesting because last season with an ankle injury, Max Strus missed the first 27 games. Now there's just 27 games left.
Yeah, so earlier, yesterday, actually, we did this segment we call No Fence Riders, where you pretty much pick a side and that's it. And one of the questions was about Max Strus, and will Max Strus play over 17 games this season before the regular season ends, was the question, and the majority of the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show cast answered no to that question. How likely is it that he get at least 10, 15 games up under 10 games max under his belt before the season ends?
I think that's ideal, right? That's what the Cavs want. They don't want to rush him back. Obviously, they've been extremely cautious with him to this point in the season. But I think if you can get a minimum of 10, 15 games on the court, I think it would help not only him, but everybody around him. Because, again, this is not the same team from when he was on it last year. He was so critical. And obviously, we've known that he's been an tenacity level of player. He's played with a different level of intensity that the Cavs have needed, missed, but they've also added leadership voices to kind of fill the void that he has left, obviously without being on the court. So I do think it's extremely important for Max Strus to at least get 10 games on the court before the playoffs, because Kenny Atkinson talked on Wednesday about wanting to and needing to have rotations, roles, idea of what players are doing, when they're coming in, when they're coming out, finalized by 2 to 3 weeks left in the regular season ahead of the playoffs. And I think Max Strus, obviously they didn't trade him, so he should be a part of that if he's healthy enough to be on the floor.
So talk about some of the benefits that this recent stretch of time off during the All-Star break has given the Cleveland Cavaliers. They finally get a chance to have a couple team practices, more in-depth film study. Of course, guys are hanging around each other, building up that chemistry. Just talk about the impact and what goes into, just this recent stretch of time off and what would be the beneficiaries over this next 27 games.
Yeah, Earl, I think it's important because you remember last year, right, when DeAndre Hunter was traded to the Cleveland Cavaliers, and they didn't have a practice until right before the playoffs. One practice, Kenny Atkinson continued to mention, that they had with DeAndre Hunter. Well, Dennis Schroeder and Keon Ellis have already had two. They had one in Los Angeles at USC, and they had one today ahead of the return from the All-Star break. Yesterday, Wednesday, ahead of the All-Star break. So I do think it's important to note that those two players are going to be beneficiaries of being around the guys and getting to actually play next to them rather than just having to figure it out when they're on the court together. James Harden now has had a practice with the Cleveland Cavaliers, and Kenny Atkinson might be the biggest beneficiary. He was adamant that he didn't know a whole lot about Keon Ellis coming into this trade, but now you had the runway of the All-Star break where he got to look through the film, look through all the different things about Keon, where he can figure out to utilize him in the best roles, and we're knowing and seeing how Kenny Atkinson is going to help him be in positions of success. So I think the new guys are going to benefit from being a little bit rested, obviously coming off the All-Star break, but also the film work that was able to be put in. And even though they weren't able to have practices over the break, I'm being told that there have been communication between player and coach to have a different understanding of what is necessary going forward.
Yeah, one of the first things that stood out to me about James Harden was just the level of basketball IQ that he possesses. You hear him talking to Serena Winters after the games, and he's talking about, hey, listen, I'm just going off a little bit of film study and just really just balling off of vibes. Can you speak to a player of that caliber being able to just primarily insert himself into a situation on the fly the way he has as they're figuring things out? I can only imagine it means scary hours the more that he figures out the Cleveland Cavaliers offense.
I think that's the beauty of Donovan Mitchell's leadership, right? That's how Donovan Mitchell has acclimated different players to this roster over the years. It's never been about necessarily who has gone, but how can I make you feel the most comfortable? And James Harden is one of the best players of all time. So we're understanding that he is going to be able to play in a certain level next to Donovan Mitchell. And Donovan Mitchell admitted that he has never played with a player like James Harden. So they're going to be able to feed off of each other. They're going to be able to learn from each other. And sometimes it's going to be, okay, James Harden in isolation, getting off the ball. And then you see Donovan Mitchell kind of in the corner being ready to make defenses pay. And I think there is a give and take that only high-level IQ players and players that are on the same page of what they want to do at the end of the season could get to this point. They have one goal. They know why James Harden was here. They not only want to get past the Eastern Conference semifinals, they want to get to the NBA Finals. That's the goal for this team, and the moves that they made have continuously shown that that is the timeline that they have.
Going into the All-Star break, the Cavs are 34-21. They were winners of 5 in a row, 9-1 in their last 10 games. I think 12-3 in their last 15 games. Before we even get to the trade that took place right before the trade deadline, certain players underachieved to start the season, in my opinion. We had to deal with a lot of different injuries. It seemed like the Cleveland Cavaliers, man, deployed more different lineups than any other team in the NBA, at least the upper echelon teams in the NBA. Just through that first half of the season, heading into the All-Star break, what was your opinion of the Cleveland Cavaliers? How would you describe that first half of the season?
I would describe it as understanding failure, right? Because they had to take accountability for what didn't work. Obviously, the DeAndre Hunter trade that they thought was going to fix the small forward issue that ultimately didn't. Moving away from Ty Jerome, obviously a mistake at this point in the season because they didn't have another offensive creator in the second unit that would mitigate the issues when Donovan Mitchell wasn't on the floor, right? And not to say that Sam Merrill or Jalen Tyson hadn't stepped up into that role, but they were starting because of all the injuries that the Cavs were dealing with. So you didn't have Ty Jerome or a secondary creator off the bench to be able to take on that offensive load. And then obviously Lonzo Ball for Isaac Okoro, that trade, you lose someone that you were basically building up through the organization that had been here for years, and you traded for someone who was arguably the worst player in the NBA this season in Lonzo Ball, no matter what he wants to say on his podcast. So I do think that this Cleveland Cavaliers team was able to admit failure. And that's one of the biggest things we talk about with franchises and being able to step back and take a look in the mirror. And for them to do that and then make the moves to say that, to get Keon Ellis, to get Dennis Schroeder, to get James Harden, I think it showcased a different level of understanding and emotional intelligence of the roster that they were not going to get where they wanted to go with the players that they had. They got rid of the 3 worst net rated players on the Cleveland Cavaliers in the moves that they made. And that should tell you that they are only looking to go on the up and up in the final 27 games of the season.
Yeah, and I think it's a credit to Kobe Altman as well, like to show the level of humility and just like awareness of what's going on in the moment. And I'll even add to this, in my opinion, man, I think the emergence of Jalen Tyson, the continued emergence of Naquan Tomlin probably made Kobe Altman feel even more comfortable being able to part ways with some of the pieces that he put together. I go back to years past to where a lot of people felt there was a sense of stubbornness there to not want to break up the core four. But for him to assess what's going on in real time and being able to make some moves that got the Cavs better defensively, better offensively, and tougher overall, I think hats off go off to him, which leads to my next question. What did you think about the Cleveland Cavaliers and their ceiling prior to the trades? And what's your opinion of what their ceiling is now after those acquisitions that you just named?
I think they were going in the right direction already, right? As we mentioned, they were on a hot streak with Jared Allen and Donovan Mitchell leading the charge, right? With them able to help themselves over that stretch. And that's kind of been the narrative for this team for a while now. When Darius Garland and Evan Mobley were out, Donovan Mitchell and Jared Allen would pick up the reins and keep this team going. But I think they understood that the Eastern Conference semifinals would be a struggle for them again because of the teams that are atop the Eastern Conference. Obviously, you have you have the New York Knicks, you have the Boston Celtics, you have the Detroit Pistons. The understanding is these are powerhouses, right? And even before the trade deadline, they were going to give the Cavs team fits. Now you look at what the Cavs have done, and I think they have a better understanding of we can now contest with all of these different teams and potentially get out of the Eastern Conference. I'm not going to go as far as saying that I think they're going to win an NBA championship with this roster. I still think that they needed a subsequent move after the James Harden trade to get another star player to be able to get to that level of contending with Western Conference teams like the Denver Nuggets, the OKC Thunder, and so on. But I do think that they can get past the Eastern Conference big juggernauts of New York, Boston, and Detroit. And I think all 3 of those teams test the Cavs in different ways, but they schematically all have similar styles that can test the Cleveland Cavaliers.
So to yesterday on the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show, I told you we played a game called No Fence Riders. And one of the questions that Mikey McNuggets, Mike Lucas asked was, will Kenny Atkinson deploy the 2 big lineup to close out games? And I cut a clip of the entire panel giving their answer, including a nice, interesting nugget from Mike at the end. So I want to play the clip, have you listen, and then have you react. Cool?
Yes, sir. Let's do it.
All right, here it is right here.
Why do you believe Kenny Atkinson will start closing games with both bigs?
Because otherwise, I think the only other option is to play with 4 guards, essentially, right? And who else would you play? Are you going to go with 4 guards? Certainly if you're losing, you're going to play with the 2 bigs. If it's a close game and you're losing, I can't have Dean Wade on the court at the end of the game. So I got no other big guys. And the way Jared Allen's playing right now, I think it makes sense to close games that way.
That was kind of my thinking too.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think Sam Merrill's going to close games, right? So who is it? Process of elimination.
Yeah.
Right. So we'll see. It's matchup dependent.
Right.
And this team is going to be.
Yeah.
These next couple of months are going to be all about timing, spacing, rhythm, all of those things. But it was an interesting one. But I would lean towards yes, just because I think it's about your best five, and most times your best five combination is going to include both of those guys.
That was the key word, was matchup dependent. I think a lot of it depends on who you're playing. Is there a random night where they could close together? Yeah, sure. But I think I took it as just in general, what is the closing lineup?
So who's the fifth guy for you?
I could be Sam at times. It's obviously the two guards. It's Jalen Tyson, and it could be Max when he's healthy.
Right.
It could be
It's really the fifth guy, because we know it's going to be Mobley, Donovan, James, and Tyson, I think, right? So who's the fifth guy? Is it Allen? Is it Strus? Is it Merrill?
Can I throw a curveball?
What's that?
I don't know Mobley's in that five.
Because of
I am not convinced, and we talked about this on the podcast last night.
Yeah.
If you're making a closing lineup, depending on how Mobley fits in with this,
Right.
if they're closing with one big, it's not a guarantee it's Mobley.
So before you react, two parts to that, because when Mike said that kind of threw me for a loop a little bit, and I understand like JA has been balling, since James Harden has arrived, and the way that it came off is almost like Allen has surpassed Evan Mobley as far as being the big in that closing lineup. So the two-part question: do you think with the way the team is built now that Kenny will start closing games with two bigs? And do you think that Evan Mobley won't be a part of that lineup like Mike?
I think it's the big word is matchup dependent, right? Because let's talk about it in playoff scenario, right? Let's talk about it in a way where the Boston Celtics, the New York Knicks, the Detroit Pistons, those are the top three teams that I think could threaten the Cavs from getting to the NBA Finals, right? Boston went and got Nikola Vucevic. That's a great pickup. They could add Jason Tatum by the end of the season. Who knows if he's going to come back? New York, Mitchell Robinson and Karl Anthony Towns. More so Mitchell Robinson, not as much Karl Anthony Towns, right? Because we're talking about the offense, but we're also talking about rebounding in this conversation. Then the Detroit Pistons, Jalen Duren and Isaiah Stewart, you understand the physicality that they pose. They like to impose their will on opponents. And I think it's interesting because whether or not the Cavs, it's based on the matchups, right? But it's also based on if the Cavs are winning or losing games. And I think I'm in the opposite bucket of the big guy at the beginning, because to me, if the Cavs are winning games, they're going to deploy the two big lineup for a more defensive look to be able to secure wins. If they're losing games, Kenny Atkinson has been known to go to a smaller ball lineup to expand where the Cavs can go on the floor and add shooting, because obviously, as we know, 3 points are more than two. So that's why I think the math would lead to Evan Mobley being a guy that would continue to be on the floor in the one big lineup, depending on how he's shooting the basketball. Because I think Evan Mobley, his growing three-point shot, even though it hasn't been as good this season as it was last year, the willingness to take those shots is going to help this Cleveland Cavaliers team. So if you had to put together a five-man lineup, say that the Cavs are losing, here's the five-man lineup that I think the Cavs will go to. I think it would be James Harden, Donovan Mitchell, Jalen Tyson, Dean Wade, and Evan Mobley. That's who I think it would be. But if the Cavs want to go super small, then you switch out Dean Wade for Jalen Tyson at the 4, Sam Merrill plays the 3, and now you have spacing across the lineup, right? If the Cavs are winning games, I think they go to a defense-first lineup. I think they have James Harden. I think they have I think they have Donovan Mitchell. I think they have Sam Merrill. I think they have Jalen Tyson. I think they have Dean Wade. I think they have Evan Mobley and Jared Allen, right? So there's different options for this Cavs team to go with, and I think there's the optionality is the power of this roster, right? Because you have so many different places to go, and Kenny Atkins has talked about the combinations and the lineups and trying to figure out who works best together. 3-man groupings, 4-man groupings, 5-man groupings, where he can find the best success for his team. And I think what was difficult for him last year was deploying lineups that weren't necessarily on his spreadsheet coming into the game, but going based on what was happening in the contest and adjusting on the fly. If last season, if the Cavs were playing poorly with their starters, the starters were still going to play, right? I think Kenny Atkinson and the injuries this season and all these different things are going to force him, because of the game time that they got this season of Naquan Tomlin, of Craig Porter Jr. If there's a scenario where those guys, or Keon Ellis even, because we've seen him close a game already this season for the Cleveland Cavaliers since being traded, I think there are scenarios where the final 5-man unit is not going to necessarily look exactly how you would think coming into the contest, even if you knew the matchups coming in, because you understand what Kenny Atkinson has seen over the course of the season, but also what the game itself is going to tell you. Because, again, if the two big lineup, and I wrote about this for Cleveland.com today, the importance of it is finding a way to get Jared Allen and Evan Mobley to be successful on the offensive end when they're on the floor together. And Kenny Atkinson has found a way to do that better than J.B. Bickerstaff had over the last couple of years. But when it comes to this team with James Harden, they've known for staggering minutes. James Harden doesn't necessarily play with Donovan Mitchell all the time. Jared Allen doesn't necessarily play with Evan Mobley all the time. Donovan and Evan play together. James and Jarrett play together. That's the combination that Kenny Atkinson has already found and is going to lean into. But when they come together, how does that look? And who is that 5th player on the roster that makes that group gel all the way together?
Yeah, this is exciting times, right? And it sounds like Kenny Atkinson got his work cut out, but I'd rather have my work cut out with these problems than being another team who don't have these issues. So just hearing you speak about all that, it kind of leads to my next question. You know, we still in this honeymoon phase with all the new additions that we have. The fan base is overly excited, and it seems like optimism has been restored. Now, with all that being said, we still got 27 games left to go in this regular season. What do you foresee some of the biggest challenges being for the Cavaliers over that stretch?
I think maintaining a defensive identity with such an offensive firepower group, right? Because the Cavs want to continue to say that they're a defense-first team. And sure, defense in a 7-game series in the playoffs is going to be pivotal because the game slows down, you get physical, all these different things. But over the last 7 games, when Evan Mobley has been out, the Cavs have been the number 1 offense in the NBA, right? And you cannot go away from an identity that is calling to you. We knew last year that the Cavs had one of the best regular season offensive ratings in NBA history. Mm-hmm. So I think finding an identity that fits this group. Kenny Atkinson talked on Wednesday about leaning into the principles, going through defensive focus, because that's an area that they still think that they can improve on. I think getting them to realize or switch their defensive principles slightly to less of we want to be a pest on the perimeter or wherever the opposing offense is going to run their offense, but also realizing, and especially if they play with those 2 bigs, that they're supposed to be there to help you, and funneling them to the painted area can be helpful. And I think trying to figure out where the defense meshes, finding out what the defense is best at. Obviously, he knows about Jalen Tyson and he knows about Sam Merrill and all these players. But how does James Harden play? Is he more of a help defender? Is he more of a tagger? Is he more of a guy that is able to come off and block shots, as we've seen, right? I think that Dennis Schroeder, are you guarding 94 feet? Are you able to maintain that at 30-plus years old? How are you going to be able to maintain that and help Donovan Mitchell be a primary ball handler on the offensive end, right? Keon Ellis, we know you're a deterrent. We know you're a pest. We know you're an irritant. Are you able to keep that up or play with a high vigor for the limited minutes that you're given at any given game? I think the defensive end of the floor and being able to increase that and find out who they are on that end of the floor is going to be the most difficult, but also the most rewarding if they can figure it out.
A couple more minutes with my homie Ethan Sands of Cleveland.com, who covers the Cleveland Cavaliers. Ethan, you know, I said earlier that I felt like the Cleveland Cavaliers got tougher. They got better defensively and better offensively, but there has been a stigma that has clouded this team the last couple of seasons of being soft. And we know Donovan Mitchell is a dog. Just watching this season progress, Jalen Tyson has ID'd himself as a dog. Daquan Tomlin is a dog. I think Keon Ellis and Dennis Schroeder comes in here with a level of toughness that kind of helps, mesh into almost this new developed identity that the Cleveland Cavaliers have now. Talk about the identity of this team now, and do you think that that soft label is starting to shed a little bit from this basketball team?
I think it can only be shed in the playoffs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Regular season accolades, regular season performance. We saw where that got the Cavs last year, 64 wins. Right. And what did you get to show for it? In the Eastern Conference semifinals, flame out, where that soft label returned and reared its ugly head. So that can only be removed or lifted by a performance in the playoffs. And obviously, I think we understand who we're looking at, right? Jared Allen, where are you going to be at with Evan Mobley on the floor? You have been great over the last 7 games. You have been compared by teammates to Wilt Chamberlain. Are you going to be able to maintain that level of dominance when the ball is not necessarily going to find you on every possession? Are you going to be able to stay engaged when the ball is not always going to find you? And defensively, what does that look like as well? Are you still going to be vocal? Are you still going to be a leader? Are you still going to be ready for the moment? And I think that's important for Jared Allen because his engagement is critical to his mental thinking. His physical is usually going to be fine. He's usually able to fight through any adversity that's in his way that way. I don't think physicality is the problem for Jared Allen. I think it's mental toughness that the Cavs need to continue to get over. And I do think that adding Dennis Schroeder, Keon Ellis, James Harden to a group is going to be helpful, not only because of the mental toughness that they have already. Obviously, James Harden over 170 playoff games. Keon still is getting into that realm, but Dennis Schroeder, 70 plus playoff games. Just the understanding of what it takes to be in that environment is going to help. But also when it comes to being a leader on the floor, holding teammates accountable in film rooms still, being able to voice your opinion, even if it's negative, even if it's uncomfortable. I think these are the types of guys that are able to do that. And their voice holds weight because they've been in these situations. They've been in these experiences, and you can teach off of that. It also alleviates some of the burden on Donovan Mitchell, right? Because we know how much experience he's had in the playoffs, but how much of a leadership burden he's had to carry, especially with Max Strus being out, because Max usually helps shoulder that load. But without him being on the floor, you can only do so much. So now you have 2 more players that can voice their opinion that people want to listen to. And whether or not that transfers onto the floor, that is still to be seen. But I think there is a mental gap that is starting to be bridged for this Cavs team when it comes to mental toughness. And I think, of course, obviously, there's only been 4 games played with Keon and Dennis, 3 games with James Harden. I think we still get to see it over the last 27 games, but it's moving in the right direction. But I want to reiterate this. The label can only be taken away if they prove that they can get through some of these physical teams. Obviously, as I continue to say, Boston, Detroit, New York, those 3 teams can all test the Cavs physically and mentally. And whether or not they're able to rise to that occasion during the playoffs will show itself and show who this team truly is. And if their championship aspirations are only just that, aspirations, or if they're truly contenders in an Eastern Conference that seems wide open, but is going to be as competitive as it can be at the top.
Which I think now is I think that leads to the perfect way to wrap up this interview. You wrote in a recent article that the Cleveland Cavaliers timeline has, quote, been amplified. And for our audience that's watching and for those who are listening, kind of unpack that some and explain to the fan base what you mean when you say the Cleveland Cavaliers timeline has been amplified.
It starts with Donovan Mitchell, right? He has 1 guaranteed year under contract with the Cleveland Cavaliers after this season, right? Then you have James Harden, who has a player option after this season. Then you look down the roster, Larry Nance Jr. and Thomas Bryant are on 1-year deals that expire at the end of this season. Dean Wade, one of the most pivotal defenders on this team, has a 1-year deal. He is on an expiring contract. Craig Porter Jr., club option after this season. There are going to be many decisions that need to be made this offseason that are tied to the success that happens this year. So the trajectory has been amplified because they know the window is now. they're not looking to the future. Obviously, they have a plan, a contingency plan with Jalen Tyson and Evan Mobley for that future, but they're focused on the now. They're focused on winning a championship this year, contending and earning the respect and earning the pride of the players who are having these expiring contracts or could be extended to say that this is the spot where you can win a championship. And obviously, James Harden and Donovan Mitchell are at the forefront of that because they are all NBA caliber players. And what that means for this team, what that means for the rest of this season is critical because of how they're going to basically make up their mind for themselves and whether or not that pairing can work and whether or not that can amplify all the players around them and find a way to create an environment that is built on winning, because we've known that about this team for the last few years, but what that means in a playoff setting, what that means against some of the best teams when inevitably rotations shrink, games get more intense, and when games get more intense, when games get more physical, all these things. And I think they're going to ultimately make the decision for themselves based on how this season ends up. Because if the Cavs thought that Donovan Mitchell was ready to sign an extension, obviously after his 10th year of accrued service next year when he's up for a supermax deal, they wouldn't be trying to pick and choose players to elevate this team. They would have been ready to talk about a runway, talk about where they are in the future. They're talking about right now. They're talking about winning a championship this season. And again, I'm not necessarily sure that they can, but I think they're in the best position that they could be to do so with this roster.
There it is, man. It's go time for the Cleveland Cavaliers. 27 games remaining. That starts tonight against the Brooklyn Nets. Listen, everybody and their mama has talked about there's a certain level of seriousness that's attached to this Cleveland Cavaliers team. Now, we are in that honeymoon phase. Adversity will come, but how will we respond is the biggest question me, you, and the rest of the Cleveland Cavaliers fan base will be, looking to get answered as this season continues on and we get to the playoffs. I think anything less than a trip to the Eastern Conference Finals will be a disappointment this season, especially after pushing all the chips into the middle of the table. It's go time. It's go now, however people want to put it. And as you put it, the Cleveland Cavaliers timeline has been amplified. Ethan, man, you're one of my favorite people in the world, in the city, man, in this business, brother. Thank you for taking time out of your busy morning to join me to talk about some Cleveland Cavaliers basketball. Make sure y'all check out Ethan's work at cleveland.com. Make sure y'all follow him on X. Y'all see his handle right there, bro. Y'all know the vibes, man. Be great, spread love. Any final thoughts before I let you go?
I appreciate you having me on. I can't wait for the next time. Thank you, Earl.
Y'all know the vibes, man. Be great, spread love. Remember, being great come with a price, and spread love is priceless. Till next time, I'm Earl of Pearl. That's Ethan Sands. Peace. We out. Love y'all.